a lot of times, and I do this, I will take what's going on and I will remove myself and step back and I will analyze it. I'll step back and give myself a different perspective. And it makes a huge difference. God taught me that, and I have never let it go. Okay, so I want to welcome Life in Christ TV as well. And hi, everybody. Nice to be here. Can everybody hear me back there? Okay. Okay. So I don't see a lot of faces from the people that were here last week. I think one lady, maybe a couple. So I'll kind of give you just a little snippet of what we went through. So I've been a warrior since, oh my gosh, I don't know how long. Seems like forever. God started training me as a warrior back in the late 80s. Long time. 94, I became a minister. And the Lord started with having me help people out of witchcraft. And it was amazing because I was in college out in Monmouth, Oregon, and they would just come out of the woodwork. I wasn't looking for them. They would just like all of a sudden would meet them or something would happen. And it really wasn't my forte. It wasn't it wasn't something I would have chosen for, how I wanted to serve God. And so in about the mid-90s, I asked God to transition me out, and he did, and I became an intercessor for the nation. It was really kind of amazing because I was crying out to God to use me. And, like Mike, I love worship. And so I have my little prayer room, and I would worship for an hour, and then I would cry out. And I cried out, God, use me or I'll die. And I really meant it. And I just flung everything that was in my hands, across the room, just in desperation. And the Lord told me at that time that later, which is coming up, that I'd be involved in government, but that it wasn't time for that yet. And then I was worshiping the next day, and he gave me a vision of an eagle. And I thought, what is that? And I thought, well, I'll flow with it. And so I just started going around the room as I saw the eagle. The next day, I got a flyer in the mail, Gathering of the Eagles. And I said, wow, So that was on a Friday, and it was a brochure that came in the mail, and it was for Gathering of the Eagles, and it was for back in Jacksonville, Florida. And I thought, well, I'm supposed to go, but we didn't have the money. That day, my husband's boss paid for either my airfare or for the hotel. I can't remember which came first. The Monday, a check came in the mail, and it paid the other one. So Friday, Monday, just boom, boom, everything was paid for. And so I did that, and God really took all the authority, everything that he had taught me prior to that, and he escalated it. Just an amazing time. And so I did that until the 2000s. And had some horrendous experiences. I think I shared one of them where, after we interceded for President Bush after 9/11 in Brunswick, Georgia, the first G8 summit after 9/11. And we interceded. We actually blocked. There was going to be an assignment against President Trump, against his life, and that was stopped. And so a lot of amazing things. But as we were flying home, I was going to fly from Brunswick to Atlanta to Texas to home. And I was going to wait to pray for the longer length. And I saw somebody else praying, and I thought, well, you know what? I might as well go ahead and pray. Anyway, long story short, I saw a vision of the plane and Satan taking his fingers and twirling that plane, flipping it, and it crashing. And so I started praying the blood and covering the plane with the blood and binding Satan from, doing his assignment. I got the peace. The flight was very, very smooth. It was a beautiful flight, from Brunswick to Atlanta. And we were going just so beautifully. And all of a sudden, the plane flipped. And it flipped about halfway, and the pilot brought it back and flipped it the other way. So we did a complete circle, only in halves. And everybody screamed. Everybody grabbed their seats. I was one of them. It was like scary. And then, we flew on. And the pilot never said anything about it, but I was never going to fly again. And so, I don't like warfare at 30,000 feet. It's not the best place to have it. But then a year later, I was fasting and I did a 30-day fast. And it was, God, do something. Do something. Show me what I'm supposed to do. And I got a phone call at the end of the 30 days from a girl in Chicago who had been with me at the Gathering of the Eagles. And she said, Maggie, I think we're supposed to go to Dutch and Chuck's ministry thing in South Carolina. Dutch Sheets and Chuck Pierce. And so, like, I don't know, I'll pray about it and let you know. And it was, of course. And so I went and I flew and had a beautiful flight. But here's what happened. The Lord in that one, Dutch said something that he had never said before. And he said, we're supposed to take down Shebna. And he said, Shebna is from the Old Testament, and it is the pastors that are in place that are there building their own kingdom for their own glory. And yeah, an amazing thing. And so I started interceding because God, everything that was in that ministry, God had shown me within the 3 months prior. And it was just amazing. Everywhere I went, I kept seeing a wolf. I saw a real wolf outside the city of Monmouth when I was driving to pick blackberries. My dad wanted to go fishing, and so my dad had his own boat, and so we went salmon fishing out of Depot Bay or out of Newport. And I got out of the car, I turned around, and there's a person that had a covering on their car, and it was a wolf. I mean, I got a flyer in the mail about wolves. I mean, everywhere I was getting was about wolves. And so Dutch had talked about that. And so anyway, here's the thing that I wanted to share. And well, actually, I didn't want to share. This wasn't the part of my sermon, but it is now. So I'm interceding against the spirit of Shebna, and I am tearing Shebna down. And after about 3 or 4 months, I get very tired because it was very wearing, to do. And so finally one day, because I was losing my strength, and I came out, whoops. So I came out to my family and I said, I need help. I said, like with Moses, I need you to raise up my arms to support me, to hold up my arms. And they did. And I got my prayer shawl and I took it and I parted the waters. And I felt, we interceded for, oh my goodness, probably a half hour to an hour, parting the waters, commanding, breaking the power of Shebna. And it broke. As everybody was walking off, I heard very quietly, pray the blood. Now, it was just that still small voice. It was very, very quiet. And I didn't. Because, see, I had to learn obedience. I had to learn how real things were in the spiritual realm. And I don't think that's one thing that we have understood. This battle that we're going through now is all spiritual. It's manifesting in the natural, but it is a spiritual battle. So this is where I learned this about Shebna, and I can't tell you what the hit was, but I can tell you it almost wiped me out. It almost killed me because I didn't pray the blood. When I heard God say, pray the blood, I called my mentor at the time. I called Nita Johnson and said, help, Nita, what do I do? And she told me what to do. She said, you go into your room, you stay in bed, you read through the Word of God because He sent forth His Word and He healed them. Let the water of the Word heal you. And she said, just stay in bed. And so I did. And it took about 10 days before I started feeling better. I couldn't move. I was hemorrhaging. I just can't tell you enough. I can't share with you, like I said, because, it was a horrific attack. But I learned how real the spiritual realm is. So fast forward, I believe that's 2000 and, Bush had just gotten just the G8 Summit about 2004 or 5. And then when I went to hear Dutch and Chuck, it was about 2005 maybe. So yeah, somewhere in there. So now we fast forward to 2009, and God asked me, will I go through this tornado? And I had a choice. I think this part I shared before. How many were here? Okay, you were. A few, but not a lot. So, so God gave me a choice. I could either take an airplane from Idaho to Oregon, and it would be a 1-hour flight. But if I took the airplane, I would have to go through an F5 tornado, and I was not guaranteed to make it through. Or 8 hours to drive home from Boise, or I could drive. And if I drove, it would be blue skies, birds singing, this beautiful, peaceful, I was driving in the convertible, just this beautiful life. Well, after all that warfare, I wanted to take the car. My family wanted to take the airplane. And their reasoning really made a lot of sense. We've been through battles my whole Christian, life from the 80s. I mean, I was a Christian young, but had been all warfare. And they said, you can do it. And I said, and we wanted the promises that went with it because God offered, really nice things if we went with it, plus the calling and everything else. And so I said, well, I don't want to, but I will because that makes sense, And so I told the Lord, yes, we'll go through it. The Lord came to me in December, just like a week later, and said, that doesn't count. He said, it's not their decision, it's yours. You're the one that's going to be going through it. And, I said, and I told the Lord, I said, Lord, you know my heart. I don't want to. But I know that you train my hands for war, and I know that it's your will that I do it. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. Therefore, not my will be done, but yours. Okay, so we went into immediately a horrific times 10 battle with the enemy. When he said F5, he was not joking. We at one time, and I didn't share this before, we at one time were in intense battle. They were either trying, all the other battles before that had been on the outside. This battle was against my family. And it knocked us for a loop because we didn't expect it. We expected an outside battle. We expected a Shebna battle. We expected, something that we could come against on the outside. And it wasn't. It was trying to kill my family, my husband, my son, my daughter, or trying to have them walk away from God and become Satanists, or, so on and so forth. That was the 5 things were taken. That was one of the areas. One of the areas was our finances. One of the areas was the substance. One of the areas was timing. And the other area was power of attorney to have legal access to hit our lives. So here's the thing. In the first little bit, I won the major portion of it, against my kids. But because they didn't feel it, because they felt the attack still, they didn't believe it. So faith had to come into play. You have to believe God. I don't care what it looks like. I don't care what's happening. If God says you're free, you're free. If God says you've won, you've won. And let it be done according to how you have believed. So because of their unbelief, because, they were going off and believing what they saw rather than what God said, they were still getting hit. So we had to go through another battle because we had to teach them faith, to believe God. And really, that's what God is going to bring the church into, is that we believe God and not what we feel or not what we see or not what it looks like, but what God said. Because what he says is truth, and you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. It's a huge part of our victory. So we won 3/5 of it. And the other 2/5, the money and the timing, were not won. So I was in one battle, and the sky was filled with demonic forces. The sky was filled. Have you ever heard of the blood and the Crips? Yes. It was the Crips. And see, that's why I'm saying all these things that back, the blood and the Crips, is all spiritually backed. If there's blood and Crips here, there's blood and Crips there. And same thing like with Shebna and all that stuff. So the Crips were attacking us, and I know this sounds funny, But God opened up a vision. We saw the sky was filled with angels. Filled with angels. But there was this one funnel that came in, and it was disobedience. And it was going into one room of the house. And God told me, because they were being bombarded with demonic forces, the Lord told me they're playing with it. And I went, oh. So I had to correct them and say, no, 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 no. My angel showed up, big dude, one of them, and told us what to do and told us what was happening. So I grabbed that person, went to the bedroom, said, you got to repent. You've got an open door. It's opening up the door to the battle with the enemy, and I want it taken care of now. And so we did. We took care of it. But as we were taking care of it, another open vision came in. They were trying to get to us before the repentance could take place. Does that make sense? And they went to attack us, the Crips, and God will protect you with his angel's wings. God put his wings over us, and I could hear them flapping at a horrendous rate, shielding us, like this, protecting us, and it blocked them, and they were defeated. This is how real this battle is. So we won 3/5 of it, and then Jim did not make it. He turned over to the enemy's side. He tried to kill my son 3 times, tried to kill Christy once, horrific. And so I called him and said, really? Are you doing this? You've joined the enemy. You're attacking your family. Have you considered the cost? Yes, I have. And I know exactly what I'm doing, and leave me alone. Haven't talked to him since. So, we're still praying for him. We're still believing. But as far as reconciliation, we're not going to go there. We have to rise up out of that way of thinking. God says, my ways are not your ways, nor my thoughts your thoughts. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than yours. And in Revelation 4, verse 1 or 2, it says, come up here, and I will tell you great and mighty things. Well, we have to come up to his understanding. We have to come up to his way of thinking, to his understanding, to his way of doing it. Because when we're operating in our understanding and in our ways, we miss it. We will. We won't be successful. One time the Lord gave me a vision. I'm moving again. One time the Lord gave me a vision, and this will help clarify it. In the vision, I was standing next to the seashore, and I saw an airplane come from my right-hand side, and the airplane flowed down, and it crashed into the ocean. And in the vision, I went, oh my gosh. And I knew that was their ministry. I knew it had to do with spiritual, but the plane crashed into the ocean and done. The whole vision repeated, only this time I wasn't standing next to the ocean. This time I was back on one of the cliffs, and the scene replayed. This is how amazing this is. The scene replayed. Now in the vision, I'm back, but I see the same thing. Now I see that there's a little boy on the beach, and he threw a toy plane, and the toy plane flew and landed in the ocean. Same scene, but a different perspective. I was able, by standing back and not being so close to it, I was able to see more clearly. And I was able to see the whole picture rather than what I saw when I was smack dab up to it. Does that make sense? So a lot of times, and I do this, I will take what's going on and I will remove myself and step back, and I will analyze it. I'll step back and give myself a different perspective. And it makes a huge difference. God taught me that, and I have never let it go. It's huge. It changes the whole foundation. It makes us understand so that we can handle it in a different way. When I saw that plane and I was smack dab up, I was terrified because the plane crashed. When I'm back 100 feet, it's a little boy with a plane. What a difference. What a difference. So, sorry, I'm getting it. I'm watching myself. So, so now Jim's gone, and God says, sell your house. He spoke through Harold Eberly. And long story short, because we don't have a lot of time, I kind of like, seriously, you want me to sell my house with all we've given up, with all we've done? I love my house. It was my dad's house. My dad built the subdivision. My dad was a contractor. It was his retirement home. And it was kind of like my dad had his arms around me in that home because they'd passed away and that's all I had, And so I'm at home for the first time in 40 years, a long, long time. I'm home. And God says, sell your house. And it was like, Okay, at first it sounded great. It took about an hour and it sounded horrible. So I thought, well, it can't be God. And a week later we go down to Texas and I get the exact same word. And not only that, but I get the word, we went down to see Kenneth Copeland. And because God had put us with him because of faith. God had to teach us faith. Faith is huge, and without what he taught us, we wouldn't have won the battle, the second time around, because faith is a vital key. We learned how to call those things that are not as though they were. We learned, God showed me, what do you want? What do you want? And I started to answer him, and he said, decree it. I had to learn how to decree. So a lot of things he taught me. So anyway, God says, sell your house. We go down there. Kenneth gets up to the microphone. The very next morning, my son, daughter, and I had gotten into an argument because they thought they had confirmation the night before. And I said, look, you may have confirmation. I do not. I am not going to just sell my house without knowing where I'm going. I could move across the street and then say, there, I moved, And so I said, I'm not moving. Kenneth gets up the next morning at 9 o'clock, and he said, turn to wherever it's at, Genesis, and says about Abraham. And he said, you're to leave your father's house. He goes, and I know what you want. He said, you don't want to move without knowing where you're going. I busted out laughing. Christy and Miles were sitting each on one side of me. They both turned. I'm busting out laughing. And he explains, he goes, that's not the way it works. He said, you want God to tell you where you're moving and to chart it all out. He said, but God says, no, you move, I'll show you. You take a step first, and then I'll show you. It's by faith. He was still saying, you're wanting it mapped out. I'm wanting you to walk by faith. And so I said, yes, Lord. And we put our house up for sale, and I sold it. Worshiping. We had to leave. We moved to Missouri. And we got there, and God really impressed. Christy Miles got a job immediately. They worked for Jim Baker. And so I was worshiping all the time. We had to run from Blue Eye into Branson, to get our food and everything. And so I'm worshiping. I get so into worship. I am praising God on the way home, and I miss it. I'm in Missouri. I don't figure it out until I'm in Arkansas. And I'm looking around going, where am I? And I found out I was in Arkansas. I had to backtrack, but it was okay. I worshiped. So in this, God has Chuck Pierce appear to me in a vision, and he says, go to Texas. And he says, it has to be all three of you. He goes, Christy's going to want to stay home, but she's got to go. He knew. God knows us. Isn't that amazing? So we went to Texas, and we thought it had to do with Chuck, so we waited, till he had a conference, which was only 3 weeks away. But it didn't. The day that we got there, we won the timing back. Now all we have is the money. So we're still praying, and it took another 2 or 3 weeks, and God said, Meridian Falls, North Carolina. So we go to Meridian Falls, North Carolina. And we get there, and I get two things. One thing I get is we get the money back. Now we've got all 5, and we've won the F5. Isn't God amazing? and F5 had 5 areas. And so we won the money, and now God tells me that there is a hit, demonic hit, coming for us out of the sky. The angel says, we are waiting to see if time moves forward, and told me how to rebuke this thing and take authority over it, and that if we did, we would barely slip by. It was like in those old movies, you know, where they're going up this really windy road that has nothing on the side, and you can see, look straight down, and, you know, if another car comes, there's not enough room, but you pull in. That's what God showed me it was going to be like. So this is first thing in the morning, and I said, we've won the F5, but now we have this hit coming. I don't know what the hit is. Somewhere about noon, they start talking about a tornado in the area. F5 tornado. It ends with a tornado. You know, I hadn't thought of that. I wish I had of. I would have been more prepared. But anyway, so about noon, they start talking about tornado weather. And about 3 or 4 in the afternoon, it's swirling. And at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm watching leaves. Like, there's a whole bank of windows on this side, and they're like what Mike has here. And then on the other side of the house, there's a bank of windows that look the same. And I'm up on the house on the mountain. We're by ourselves. And I'm watching leaves whirl. And it looks like they're coming around. Well, it's because they were. They were whipping around the house. We were in the midst of a tornado. So I called Christy and Miles and said, do you think this is a tornado? I'd never been in one before. I didn't know what it looked like. And just as before they could even answer, it came over our cell phones, bzz, emergency, you're in the midst of the tornado, take cover now. And so we ran down the stairwell, and the door was locked, so we were stuck at the bottom of the tornado, or the stairwell, and we could look up and just watch it. And I'm telling you, it was swirling, and it was not fun. And Christy says, because we're watching it, Christy says, don't you think we ought to pray like God told us? We were so mesmerized by watching the tornado that we almost forgot to pray. So we started rebuking it and taking authority over it and commanding it to get off us, And here's what happened. We hear this crash, and we're thinking, did a large tree just fall on the house? I mean, wow. And we kept rebuking it, and all of a sudden, everything went dead silent. It was just light switch. It was there whirling, crash, dead silent. And we thought, or were we in the middle of it? Or, did we go up? Is it okay? And so we did. We went up after about another minute, and everything was fine. Here's what happened. That tree that we thought fell didn't happen. What did happen was that tornado was lifting the roof off. And when we rebuked it and took authority, it sat back down. Boom. That's how close we were to making it. So the battle's over. We won. And it ended with the tornado.